At this particular point, I want to welcome, we're right on cue. I want to welcome Sajib Azad and Niai for a session, Participatory Governance in Action, a WynePay case study. Once more, it is one of the things that I'm very keen on and I'm very happy about, that we're able to bring in system integrators and adopters to give us their perspective, and so that you're able to understand what's happening from the adopter perspective. So Sajib, Ni, I'll pass it over to you guys.
Thank you so much, Simon. So let us introduce ourselves. First of all, I think we have met, many of you in previous convening and also in person. We're very happy, right, to be in Tanzania in April. So my name is Nyi. I'm a CEO of the Saworks, and we are one of the partners organization in Myanmar currently implementing Mojalu-based real-time payment platform called WynePay. And I'm joined by Sajib. Sajib, please.
Thanks a lot, Ni. Hi, everyone. I'm Sajib Azad. I am a policy expert for UNCDF. For WynePay, I particularly look after governance, risk, and regulation. By way of background, I supported Ethiopia National Digital Payment Strategy, Bangladesh VAT automation system, and wrote the UN Principles of Digital Payment. And previously, I've been a banker and a regulator. Ni, over to you.
Thank you so much, Sajib. Steve mentioned something about the playbook, right? I think what we're going to be, sharing with you here is the on the ground experience of implementation in Myanmar, where we are, trying to involve the industry in, governing and also owning, right, this payment platform. And we're very excited to be sharing with you our lesson learned and the steps that we have taken so far. Can we go to the next slide, please? We have a packed agenda. Right? I will, give you a very quick, brief introduction on what WynePay is and where we are in the project right now. And Sajid will cover, what is the governance structure that we have, why we think it is critical, and how we are designing that, and the results so far. Right? So there's also a section that we will share with you on lessons learned, on where we think we could improve and where we want to take it, right, so that the implementers in other markets and other areas can also take a look at what we have done, and hopefully they can improve on that. Next slide, please. So this is a quick introduction. We have shared this before, right? So I won't go into too much detail, right? The name of the scheme that we have in Myanmar is called WynePay. It's the name means in Burmese, let's pay together. It's a very apt name for the platform that we are trying to set up, where we want it to be open, interoperable, and also very, very collaborative with the industry players, owning and participating in the governance as well. And you will see in more details, right, what we are trying to do. This project, came out of a project called Myanmar Microfinance Digitization Project, or MMD, where UNCDF Myanmar and the Saworks and Motorspokes, right, three of us are co-implementing this platform, right, together with our partners in the MFI industry and also the mobile wallet providers. Currently, we have 32 organizations who have signed a letter of commitment to use WynePay once we go live, which is the plan for 2023, Q1 or Q2, depending on the situations. We are very happy with the traction that we have had so far. We have 19 MFIs who have signed a letter of commitment, and 10 wallets, 2 INGOs, Welfare Program and Court Aid, and also 1 MPFI. Right? The 19 MFIs who are participating in WynePay serve altogether 2.2 million borrowers, which is about nearly 50% of the MFI borrowers that Myanmar is servicing. So that's the traction that we hope to see a real impact once WynePay goes live. Next slide, please. So in terms of the progress up to date, the project started in 2020 and 2021, and these are the 2 years, as you can imagine, has been very difficult for many markets and many countries, but especially in Myanmar after 2020 COVID pandemic. In 2021, we had the political instability that caused quite a lot of the situations that were unexpected and anticipated, right? And because of that, there were workarounds that we had to do. So there were some delays, but despite all of that, right? I want to share the news to the community that we charge ahead. Very thankful to the support that we are getting from the international community, and also with the partner organizations, with Motorsparks, with UNCDF. We all agree that we will not let this go, right? This is too much and too important, right? For this situation to derail us. So we kept charging ahead, and we are very happy to report that despite all this situations with the internet connectivity issues, with the power outages that we're having, with the MFI industries going through a very difficult period, we are able to actually implement or roll out the friendly user testing phase. We started that in September of 2021. We finished the friendly user testing phase 1, and we're currently in the friendly user testing phase 2. And this is where real money is being used to test the platform. And we're very happy to report that the platform is stable enough, and the participating DFSPs are confident enough that they are testing the real live money through the real wallet, passing through WynePay, and going to the core banking system of the MFIs, and marking the loan repayments in real time. And the next phases are the closed user group testing, and we are waiting for the green light from the regulators to do that, and then eventually turning the WynePay into WynePay LLC, where we will have the governance structure that Sajib will explain more about. Let me stop here, and then I will let Sajib take over. Sajib, please.
Thanks a lot, Nee. So let me just, before we go into the next slide, pick up a couple of things that has been mentioned already, and also Nee just mentioned, which is we keep on making resilient progress despite the country context and the challenges therein. And one of the key differentiators that we have found on why we're getting such support at such difficult times in the MFIs and such challenging country situation is actually the fact that we have been able to deploy participatory governance. So the next couple of slides will cover very simply, what do we mean by participatory governance? Then why did we think it was critical? Then we'll cover how, so the what, the why, the how, so how we did it, so the key mechanisms therein. And then finally the so what were the results? And then we'd like to come back and go back to our critical success factors and sort of talk through how we think, what we have learned around those cluster of, or so those themes, if I may put it that way. So Catherine, could you go to the next slide, please? Fantastic. So what is participatory governance? This is taken from the UN principles of responsible digital payment, which essentially puts a client-centric lens into digital payment and outlines not only what responsible digital payment is, but what should it feel like for the end user? Because as we all agree here, the client trust is absolutely fundamental here. So when we talk about participatory governance, we talk about encouraging industry-led solutions. We talk about engaging public sectors to engage with us, foster our effort, support interventions and industry-led solutions so we can wear down those barriers to access. We also, what participatory governance means is bring in providers, industry associations, other stakeholders, not just, and this is something actually thematically I think Steve covered earlier, not just at the end of when we have the thing, but actually at the beginning, so we can genuinely co-create what we're trying to do. So by the time we deliver, it's really good to go, and it's already meeting, and it's already fit for purpose. And then finally, we also want to ensure that what we do doesn't provide a barrier to entry. So new players have a seat at the table. So could we go to the next slide, please? Okay, so 4 bullet points on the country context. The current situation means the limitations on withdrawal. There's the directives which control FX and how it's handled. There's limitations on debt repayment, and there are ongoing liquidity challenges in the country. All this, plus the political aspect, means that the engagement with administrative elements, including the regulatory bodies, are suboptimal compared to other countries that we have operated in. And finally, on the background, what we have is a humanitarian and an economic crisis/challenges. So in sum, our implementing environment is an environment in flux. That's the key thing here. So a lot of what we landed on in terms of what should our approach to governance, to get buy-in, to decision-making, what does it need to be, drives down from these 4 bullet points. So I'll go through these 6 because we shall come back to these 6 at the end. So first, we have to be acutely focused on client centricity, as trust is fundamental. We have seen this in a number of markets. If you don't trust the governance and the decision-making, even the best technology will not be picked up. Number 2, we have to be strategically robust, but with tactical dynamism. What does that mean? That means that we have the same common goal as a group, but we actually are moving with what the environment is telling us to make sure we're doing the best possible thing for that moment, but also looking forward. Third, pragmatic yet sound practice-driven core design. So there tends to be one school of thinking that a lot of these things, such as governance mechanism, terms of references, these things are nice to have, but let's make sure we only do the things that's really, really practical right now. But actually, there is a midpoint we can reach, which is whatever we do can be broadened and deepened and plugged into different ownership models. So that's what I mean by pragmatic yet sound practice-driven design of governance. Next, proactive risk management, especially reputational. Notwithstanding the country context, the risk type that ultimately kills any project is reputational risk. When we lose trust, when the ecosystem doesn't trust us. So one of the key ways we looked at how we position this project, how we engage, how we contextualize our environment is to look at reputational risk impact and then reverse engineer it. Last 2, balancing competition and cooperation effectively. It's perhaps easy to say, it's quite hard to do. So what we have tried to do is be as transparent as possible in every step of the way. Because not everyone will think the same way, not everyone has the same strategy, not each DFSP wants the same things. But we identify where the commonality of purpose converges, and that's what we focus on. And finally, broad-based ecosystem engagement as goodwill is key. If this was a not participant-owned model, perhaps then the regulator can say, this is my platform, you have to use it. Because ours is a participant-owned and governed model, we need to make sure that the ecosystem understands what we're doing is only going to strengthen the whole ecosystem. We have to identify those win-wins, and for that, goodwill is really important. And how to get goodwill is to have broad-based ecosystem engagement. So we'll cover that. So these 6 things, for us, when it comes to governance, we have noted as our critical success factor. So these are the things we look at when we make decisions to see what the result will be. Catherine, next slide. Thank you. So this is the structure we have designed. So we have interim scheme council. We're calling it interim because we're in project design and delivery phase. And we have the interim scheme advisory. What does the scheme council do? It's the senior most decision-making body. So all the key decisions of WynePay, we'll cover that in the result, is decided and discussed at the scheme council. Scheme council members vote and approve key elements of WynePay. They also present the scheme council to the scheme advisory, and I'll come back to that in a minute, to maintain that broader engagement as well as source expertise and guidance. Our 8-member scheme council and the 3 chairs from PizzaWorks, UNCDF, and Modus Box, we do not have all the answers, neither should we. So we need to have a mechanism to tap into the ecosystem via the scheme advisory to basically make our decision-making and research and data far more richer than we could do in isolation. And also, we want to create subcommittees. And one has already been created, which is looking at bulk payment and ECT. We'll also look to create subcommittees on rules, so they're maintained and updated, on risk and regulatory and audit. As you can see, these subcommittees, essentially, we're showing you a risk governance and a corporate governance structure. The Interim Scheme Council is the board, the Scheme Advisory is the advisory board, and the different working groups and subgroups are the subcommittees of the board. So that's kind of the model we have mapped this on. And the Scheme Advisory, in turn, is the broader set of ecosystem participants, members, donors, experts, and other stakeholders. So they're not necessarily voting on what we're doing, but they're guiding and advising what we're doing. Catherine, next slide, please. So one of the key things that we have focused on after about 6 months into this governance model is to figure out what dynamic do we want between the Scheme Council and Scheme Advisory and what makes sense. And what we have come up with is that because these are made up of individual members from different institutions, the relationship and the integration needs to be done by design. So we can't just leave it to people to figure that out. We have to do it by design, which is why we have this sort of dual orbit type model. And it's implemented by active engagement led by Scheme Council members. This is absolutely key, that the Scheme Council and its engagement Scheme Advisory is not left on PizzaWorks, Motorsbox, and us as the co-chairs. It has to be driven by Scheme Council members. And for example, if I take half a step back, the bulk payment ECD technical working group is chaired by a Scheme Council member, which is one of the major MFIs in Myanmar. And that's the kind of ownership we want to see from the Scheme Council. And we'll actually go through some other examples of that. Catherine, could you go to the next slide, please? So the results. Let's go to the black and white results, essentially. So since we started in March 2021 with this governance model, we've had every other week Scheme Councils and Scheme Advisory, almost without fail, unless there were holidays. So the key part here is that we have requested time from the DFSPs, and every 2 weeks they give us this time and they engage with us because they see value and because we see value and because how important and decisive the Scheme Council is. If this was just for show, or if this was just for compliance, we would not get this kind of engagement. And the composition, let's cover that very quickly. We've had 6 MFIs and 2 banks in Scheme Council, and we have 19 MFIs, 1 NBFI, 10 wallets, and 2 NGOs in Scheme Advisory. In terms of decision-making, so far, there has been 29 separate approvals from the Scheme Council, which you can see that's quite a large volume of work. And with each of these topics, we first had a workshop with the Scheme Council, then we presented what the result of the co-creation workshop was, and then final discussion, and then approval. This is the systematic approach we have taken, sometimes in person in Scheme Council, sometimes via email, but this is the process we have followed because 1, it makes sense, 2, it's transparent, and 3, for the members of Scheme Council and Scheme Advisory, it gives them comfort that what they're connecting themselves to is progressing in the correct way, in a prudent, but also in a very decisive way. But for me, the really interesting part of participatory governance is actually the result or the outcome around the behavioral piece. So I tried to highlight here 4 examples of behaviors that this kind of participatory governance have driven. These are cohesion among participants, partners, and other stakeholders, the feeling of accountability, not responsibility, accountability, resilience as a group, and then goodwill in the ecosystem. So let me go through 4 very quick examples. So when we say cohesion among participants, partners, and other stakeholders, what we mean by this is that we have had absolute transparency around any conflict so that any decisions we make as a collective is clean. That means not only is there documentation showing that it was cleanly done and it is transparent, but actually that's how it operated in practice. That's what the recording shows. And if there are conflicts, Scheme Council members take themselves out of that particular voting decision. That way we make sure that whatever we decide is defendable and that it makes sense and it's fit for purpose. Feeling accountable sort of drops out of that. So the example I gave earlier is the one I've noted here, that Scheme Council members are leading the technical working groups, and the first one has already started. This is a scheme council member as a group feeling accountable for the working groups, giving them high quality input so that they can make better decisions, and then taking charge of that working group. So these working groups aren't entirely technical, they're led by business leaders who are members of scheme council. And I think that's really key because you're merging technical expertise with business nuance. Third, resilience as a group. So we talked about the country context, and the thing that becomes really apparent, and the thing that I have really experienced with this decision-making body, is that we are genuinely solving problems together. Because nobody has the complete answer, nobody has the complete set of information. We all have limitations in what we can do and what we can say, what we can find out. So as a group, we're actually figuring things out. And one of the good examples is how we're actually progressing on regulatory strategy. We outlined earlier that country context means that regulatory engagement is not where we would have wanted it to be. So in that situation, we have to pivot and adjust and develop our approaches and our strategy, and we do it as a group in the scheme council. And that really, to me, shows resilience as a group, because this group is thinking as WynePay and what WynePay needs to get to and how WynePay needs to get there, not their individual DFSPs only. And the fourth part, goodwill in the ecosystem. So again, the MFIs have engaged with trade organizations in Myanmar who have also made the case for WynePay. So when the regulatory support for CUG comes in and ultimately the approval comes in, they have a number of touch points to go to who will say the right things and the good things and the correct things about WynePay. This is a preemptive way to manage that reputation. And because we have goodwill in the ecosystem, that's why we've been able to get to that. Catherine, next slide, please. Okay, so we covered so far the what and the how. So now the so what. So I'll go through 3 examples of co-creation and decision-making via the participatory governance model. So the first thing we looked at, and this is one of the first approvals that the Scheme Council had to make, which was what are WynePay's goals and objectives. Now, we can all do an internet search. We can just find out what seems sensible and copy and paste it, but that's not the process we followed. What we did instead was looking at, first of all, the sound practice building blocks. So what does BIS Puffy say? Look at what governance says, look what risk management says also, and see, okay, these are the ticks. This is the examples we need to be able to demonstrate by what we have designed. But then we went into, okay, what are the critical success factors when it comes to client centricity around participatory governance? And for that, we looked at UN Principles of Responsible Digital Payment, and it has 3 things. Open technology, which Moja Loop is, which is fantastic, participatory governance, and ecosystem mindset. And we, as a collective group, decided that our governance mechanism, apparatus, arrangement, all of that will have to demonstrate both participatory governance and ecosystem mindset in not only the way we have written it down, but the way we operate it. And finally, pulled into that, DFSP goals, objectives, strategy, and plans. So this gave us, and these were voted on, these were tweaked by the Scheme Council members to come up with these 4 WynePay goals and objectives. I'm not going to necessarily read through all of them because the next couple of slides we dig in a little bit anyway, but it's worth mentioning why are goals and objectives important. And they tend to be more important when policies and processes are not already baked in and they're not hardwired. So when you're in design phases, the goals and objectives can basically provide the guiding light. So, okay, I don't have a process for it, I don't have a framework for it, but what does a good decision-making look like? What would good decision-making need to evidence? What do I need to make sure my decision achieves, our decision achieves? And that's the goals and objectives. This is why it becomes really important, and that strategic focus but tactical dynamism, that's where it really also comes into play. Because you can have, this is my strategy, this is where I need to go to, but in terms of the day-by-day, week-by-week decisions I'm making tactically, because of the country context, am I still aligned to these 4 things? So I'm not drifting strategically. Once these behaviors, or once these goals and objectives and the way we use the goals and objectives become more ingrained into the DNA of the organization and the people within the organization, then this stuff happens far more automatically. But it was really important for us to spend the time to get to the goals and objectives in a very co-creative, collaborative way, so that everyone can buy into this and actually genuinely buy into this. And by everyone, I of course mean Scheme Council, Scheme Advisory members to start with, but also the broader ecosystem when they want to look at this. Catherine, next slide, please. Thank you. So second example, now that we have the goals and objectives, how do we use it? One of the really good uses that we found was when we came to deciding which use cases we prioritize. So there's a number of things we can do. Why do we decide to do this one first, this one second, this one third? And the two use cases we looked at, first and foremost, were loan repayment use cases and loan disbursement use cases. And how did we decide on those? Although you might say, it's writ large, it's obvious, those are the two things anybody would do. But the way we defend that decision-making and the way we get to that decision-making is by going back to our goals and objectives. So we looked at our goals and objectives and identified what the key evaluation criteria is or are. So for the first one, it's inclusion. For the second one, fast, ubiquitous, user-friendly, trustworthy, reliable, and secure digital payment. This essentially alludes to both demand, but also ease of implementation. Number three, to implement cost-effective, flexible, sustainable, and high volume of transactions. Those are for goals and objective number three. For that, our evaluation criteria are volume and revenue. And the number four, contribute to Myanmar's digital ecosystem goals for a digital economy. Again, that's inclusion. So there's a repeat of inclusion. So if you put a block on that one, our evaluation criteria to prioritizing use cases are based on inclusion, demand, ease of implementation, volume, and revenue. And this very clear A to B to C to D type approach is useful for a number of reasons. One, it takes away the ambiguity of why we have decided what we have decided. Two, for external parties and regulators, it shows a very clear through line of a very robust way we make decisions and we follow through. And three, when it comes to actually engaging the ecosystem, again, this is the kind of messaging that's really important to say, we're not just doing what's easy. We're not just doing what is the most income generative. We're doing what fits our goals and objectives. And that is one very good example for me of participatory governance in action. And we'll go through one more example. Catherine. Next slide. Fantastic. Apologies for so much text, but this is genuinely a copy out, just like the previous slides are, from what we actually take to the Scheme Council. So we used to have 7 Scheme Council members. Then one of the largest leading MFIs in Myanmar wanted to join the Scheme Council. So how did we make the case for this MFI joining the Scheme Council? Now, one way could be we just say, this is the largest, it makes us look good, it makes us look credible, so let's go for it, which is sort of fine, but not really. The approach we have taken is, again, very structured and systematic, which is to say, let's assess this MFI, or let's consider this MFI within the context of the goals and objectives we have stated and signed up on. So, as you can see in the narrative there, and this slide deck will be shared with you if it hasn't been already, so you can read through the actual text. But essentially, we make the case, why would this MFI, their strategy, how does it align to WynePay strategy, goals, and objectives? On item number 2, we covered how this MFI's inclusion would allow us to learn, to test, to update approaches more proactively, sourcing deeper bench of expertise from one of the leading MFIs in Myanmar. When it comes to the implementation of a cost-effective, flexible, sustainable, and inclusive payment system for Myanmar, for MFIs and participating DFSPs that can drive high volume of transaction now and into the foreseeable future. Again, we define and we explain why this MFI can contribute to those discussions, can drive those decisions, and how it can help us to figure out how to make ourselves more cost-effective, more flexible, more sustainable, more inclusive in the way we do it. So these are the 3 examples we wanted to touch on. One, on how the participatory governance drove how we landed on WynePay goals and objectives. 2, how those very same goals and objectives are used by the participatory governance model to prioritize use cases. And then 3, the same goals and objectives are also used to defend, validate, ensure strategic alignment of new members into the decision-making body of WynePay. Catherine, perhaps we can go to the penultimate, or is the last slide? Okay, Nii, I think I've spoken a lot. I need a bit of water. Over to you.
Right. Thank you, Sajib. I'm going to call you back, right, for this
Okay.
discussion as well. On this slide, we wanted to also share with you the key learnings from this exercise that Sajib just mentioned. Even though we call it exercise, it is actually what we are truly implementing in real life. And we are hoping that when WynePay goes to commercial life in 2023, this is a model that will help us, govern the scheme. Right? So there are, quite a lot of the lessons learned that we have listed here. I would just, first touch on the first being the importance of building trust among the participants, right, who are, going to be joining this interoperable platform, right? As you all know, the DFSPs who are participating are operating in the same space. Usually they compete with each other in the commercial aspect. But at the same time, we want to create a mechanism where they can all come together and work towards something that is for the good of the industry, which is going to be mutually beneficial for everybody who's involved. And this governance structure is actually helping us achieve that. Sajid, please take it to the next lesson learned, please.
Thank you, Nii, for letting me have some water. Let's cover the other Venn diagram circles. So the second critical success factor we outlined was strategically robust, but with tactical dynamism. So 2 examples here. One we kind of alluded on, but let me share 2. One, when we were thinking through the target operating model of the different ownership structures, what this means is that we want this to be a robust, resilient platform. But the tactical dynamism comes in thinking through the different target operating models and designing our governance mechanism, apparatus, what do we want to call it, the governance structure that can plug into various target operating models. So our governance, the way we do it right now, and the way we have designed it, can plug into a number of different types of ownership models, including the participatory ownership model, which is what we're going towards. So that's one example of strategically robust and tactical dynamism. The other one is, again, we need to go to commercial scale, but how? And what are the phases we hit to get there? So the strategic focus, commercial scale, the tactical dynamism, different licensing modalities, different operating models, which we covered right at the beginning. We talked through the timeline and our progress to date. Next, pragmatic yet sound practice-driven core design. So this is about decision-making being a living, breathing thing that everyone is engaged with and they feel that they can engage with. But at the back of it, it has all the core building blocks and elements that can be converted into terms of references, legal structure, document, etc., so that when this becomes a commercial entity with all the legal checks and balances, those things can just plug in and work in that model. Next, proactive risk management, especially reputational. So this is the really interesting one, because when we talk about risk management, we tend to talk about operational risk, technology risk, the risks that we can control. But the risk that we can influence, but in some ways lose control of, is reputational. And once we lose it, it's incredibly hard to get it back. We're seeing some examples in Peru right now with BIM, for example. So it's really important. And this cluster or this theme made sure that when we engage the governance mechanism to discuss and figure out solutions in the regulatory space and the government space, we speak the language of those people and those groups. So we speak the regulatory language, we understand the regulatory objectives, and we position our risk management and why we're not going to bring in more risks to the regulator, but actually we're going to supercharge their approach to the national payment system strategy. Those things, we do it with a proactive risk management. So some of it we've alluded to and discussed. Two more. Balancing competition and cooperation effective in decision-making. So, it's not fair and it's not correct to expect a DFSP to behave contrary to its own incentivization. That's strange. You can't just say, now you're all friends, no more competition, we do it together. It doesn't work that way. Sometimes they'll be competing, sometimes they'll be cooperating. So with balancing competition and cooperation, the absolutely fundamentally key thing we found is transparency. Because we have been transparent, the DFSPs have been transparent, decision-making has also been transparent and is demonstrably transparent. So not just I'm saying it and me saying it, our documentation and recording of the sessions show the exact same thing. And then finally, broad-based ecosystem engagement as goodwill is key. This is especially important for a participant-owned operating model. It's really, really important. And if that wasn't important enough, the fluid operating environment makes it even more important that people and the ecosystem needs to understand what we are, but also what we're not. And they need to understand that we're there to get to a common good, a high quality result together with them, not by fighting and competing with the ecosystem. So it's always trying to identify those win-wins, and it tends to be a question of optics and timeline, or to identify those win-wins. And that's our job in shepherding this project with the Scheme Council to do that. I think, as usual, I have spoken far too much. We only have 5 minutes left. So perhaps, Catherine, we go to the next slide and then open up to any questions. Simeon and colleagues and committee members, over to you.
Thanks so much, Sajib. We've got 4 minutes. I'm just skimming through the chat to see if there's any questions. Jane, I see your comment. Excellent. If there are any questions, I can take one. There's a question from Amit Kumar in the chat. Sajib, it's directed to you. How does one ensure FSP participants have the necessary knowledge to make or drive decisions?
So this is a really important question. And, we normally talk about, this is not really even about capacity building, because this is not about technical. This is really about the shared purpose of what we're trying to get to. And it's our job in shepherding the project the way we designed the governance, and we brought the DFSPs along. So when the onboarding happens, these messages are passed through by the onboarding team. When the technological onboarding happens, the same messages are being passed through to the DFSP. So by the time they join the decision-making body of Scheme Council, generally, it's understood where we need to get to. It's understood how we're going to get there. So the discussion basically becomes about not if, but how, and how to do it in a resilient way. Amit, I'm not sure if that's answered your question, but Nii, perhaps you'd like to add something.
Thank you. I mean, I think, we also have, different structures that Sajib has mentioned, right? We have scheme advisory, where we have invited a larger group of FSPs to participate when they, start getting involved with the project. And from there, we have, participants who are representing different organizations. And quickly, it emerged that, they are, the right mix of the background experience and also the decision-making, position in their organizations to represent, the FSP in the Scheme Council. And I think, there's also, trial and error on trying to find out, right, who is the right, mix of the Scheme Council members who can guide us. And we have right now, we're very fortunate that we have a very good group of the Scheme Council members who have experience and also can represent their organizations at a appropriate level to learn as the decision making that we need for the scheme.
Excellent. I saw Amit give a thumbs up on answering the question. Excellent. Steve, I see your questions as well. Trying to call out some of the specific logistic lessons as well. Sajib, Neef, this would be great content to post in the Slack channel there. So
Sure.
hopefully you can get some time.
And Simeon, some of that material is already in the slides, so I can very quickly run through each of these. So how are meetings and conversations structured? That got us to the goals. They were structured via workshops and structured questionnaires. How often do we meet? Every 2 weeks. Who gets invited to the meetings? The members and any attendees they want to bring in. What are the different groups? MFI, MFI group, NGO group, and other group. So those are the 3 clusters. How does voting work? Voting works in terms of majority vote, and the ties are broken by the co-chairs. Not for this slide, for her toolkit, of course, Steve. Very happy to contribute.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sajib and Ni. Thanks for joining us. I see 44 people have already filled out the poll that's on your screen. Please do take some time to give us the feedback on this session. Once more, it does help us greatly plan for future convenings.